Okay, as we welcome in Harrison Kletzel, Irving Fishbaum, Avram Shankman, and Mark Frankel, who is here right, bright, and on time, Dr. Guy, Nachman Chapler, Marshall Castle, Michal, Menachem Yamansky, Aaron Swade, teaching us all how to learn even in hard times, Saba, and Shalom Fogel, Yitzi Muller, Dr. Black, Shimon Klein, Rabbi Kranz, Abe Arbach, Ilya Shutman, Moshe Lehman, Richard Rosenzweig, Shelley Zeitlin, David Helfgott, and Koloshin here in the shul, back in time for this year, Berish Gesseman, Gedalia Engel, Reb Kramer, Reb Moshe Jackman, Reb Goldstein, and we are holding by the bottom line of Daf Lamed Vav Amid Beis with an etymological question. My Pruzbel. Where does the name Pruzbel come from? Amrav Chista Prois Buli Ubuti. It is for the betterment of the rich and the poor. Buli Elu Ashirim. These are the wealthy. Dichsiv Shavarti Eska Ein Uschem. I will break their glorious strength. V'tani Rav Yosef, what's the glorious strength referring to? Elu Buloi Sheba Yehuda. These are the rich men of Yehuda. I will bring them down. So you see, Buli means rich people. Buti Elu Aniyim. These are the poor. Dichsiv Havei Tavitenu. You should extend the mashkin to him. You should. You should lend to him a loan. So who do you lend to? A poor person. So it's pruz, buli, ubuti. It's for the benefit of the rich that their loan shouldn't be relinquished by Shemitah, and it's for the benefit of the poor that people shouldn't be afraid to give the loans. The Gemara tells us that there's another interpretation of it. Amalei Rava Lilauza, Rava spoke to a foreigner, somebody who spoke in a foreign tongue, like Lashon Laz. My Pruzbel, what does Pruzbel mean? Amalei Pursa the Milsa. It's correcting or tweaking the item. So in this case, it tweaks the laws that Shemitah should not relinquish the debt. Remember we said that the purpose of the Pruzbel is to hand over the loan into the hands of Bezdin, so that then the creditor doesn't have to be over lo yigais to press for it, because he doesn't have to press. It's already in the hands of Bezdin. So, Amr Yehuda Mishmul, with that in mind, Yisaimim ain't tzrichen Pruzbel. Yisaimim don't need a Pruzbel because they don't have to approach. It's already in the hands of the executor. It's already in the hands of the Aviyah Yisaimim, the people that take care of the Yasim. V'chein Tani Rabbi Bar Chama Yisaimim ain't tzrichen Pruzbel. Why? Rabbi Gamliel obeys Dinoi Aviyah and Shal Yisaimim, because Rabbi Gamliel and his Bezdin, they're the father of the Yisaimim. So already it's like it was given over into the hands of Bezdin. Rishonim say these are only Yisaimim that are Ketanim. Those are the ones that, those are the orphans that the Bezdin has to watch over. Now, here's an interesting halacha. The halacha is that Pruzbel, which is a takon of the Rabbanan, is not made on a milsa de lo shchicha. A milsa de lo shchicha like takina by Rabbanan takanta. And therefore, if Ruvain gives a loan to Marshall, then the only way he could make a Pruzbel is if Marshall has some real estate. Because if he doesn't have any real estate, he's a real loser. He doesn't have any real estate. That's a milsa lo shchicha. And for a milsa lo shchicha, they didn't make a takana. That is probably the most popular explanation. There is another explanation. There is another explanation. The other explanation is that if Marshall doesn't have if Marshall has karka, so then it's as if Ruvain already collected it, because he has a lien on his karka. So that's why Shemitah, that's why you can make a prozbul. Where you don't have karka, you can't make a prozbul. That's the other way to learn. But the more popular way, which is brought down all over Shas, is the first way. So let's see the Gemara inside. Tanan Hasan ein kaisman prozbul ela ala karka. You can only write the prozbul, that the loan that Marshall owes Ruvain, brave man Ruvain, to give a loan of $600,000 to Marshall. But Ruvain says, easy come, easy go, But anyway, he gives a $600,000 loan to Marshall, and he makes a prozbul. Ein kaisman prozbul el ala karka. Now let's say that Marshall doesn't have any karka. So then Mizakeyu b'soich sadeu koshu. He could give him from his field even a minute amount. Now, according to the first reason, a minute amount is enough to make it not considered anymore a milsa lo shchicha. If you're going to learn the other way, that it's considered as if the loan was corrected, how does a minute amount, how could that be considered? But if you remember, we learned kikituna da'abaya, that there is a lumdus that you could seize it, and then seize it again, and then seize it again, and seize it again, and seize it again, even on a very small amount. The kamakoshu, what's considered a small amount? Rav Kiya bar Ashi Rav. Rav Kiya bar Ashi says in the name of Rav, afilu kelach shel kruv, even a cabbage stalk. Rav Yehuda,
I don't think I'd be very happy for you to give me your cabbage stalk, but that means you're going to be able to collect my $600,000 loan. So how can you give it to me against my will? How can you be zeicher?
Well, okay, then I won't give you the loan. You're doing this in the beginning.
Oh, you're doing it when you're giving
Yeah, what do you think?
I thought it when
No, I'm not stupid. I'm not going to give you a loan if Shemitah is going to release it, especially since you're so ungrateful that you won't take the cabbage stalk afterwards, right? Right. So
good strategy.
yeah. Now, you know something, Marsha? You have competition over here.
Who the smart aleck is trying to take my seat is.
Says the Gemara, Rav Yehuda, afilu hishel mokam lisaner ulikirayim, even if Ruvain gives a piece of karka to Marshall to put his oven or his double stove, kaisman la prozbul. Says the Gemara, even a small amount is enough. Vatani Hillel taught, this is very interesting. Hillel taught, ein kaisman prozbul el al otzitz nakev. Only if Marshall has a perforated flower pot. So since it's a perforated flower pot, so the stuff growing there is considered like ground, and you could write a prozbul. But nokav in she'ein nokav light. It's only if it's perforated, but if it's non-perforated, not. But even if it's non-perforated, he has obviously, he's allowed to keep the flower pot there. So it should be the area of the flower pot, the land of the flower pot. Amai, va'ika is the fact that he has the ground under the flower pot, so that should be good enough. Says it's talking about where Marshall has the flower pot resting on pegs. Now, on stilts. Now, the question, of course, then begs the question, wait a second, but he still has the place under the stilts. So even if the whole flower pot is not on the ground, but he has 4 stilts on the ground, and obviously he has that place. So the simple understanding of the Gemara is that the small spot of the stilt is not an area kiklach shel krov. It's not an area like the stalk of a cabbage, and therefore that's not enough. The other pshat that they say is that he doesn't even have the place. The person allowed Marshall to use his stilts. He said, you could put your flower pot on the stilts, but the stilts belongs to Reuven. So therefore, if it's not perforated, he doesn't have any karka at all. Says the Gemara, Rav Ashi maknale gidma dedikla. When Rav Ashi gave a loan, he transferred a stump of a palm tree so that the debtor should have some property because of a lay prosbel, and he relied on that to write a prosbel. Now, do you have to write a prosbel, or could you just verbalize that you're giving your debts to a bezdin? So the Gemara says, yeah, you're right. You don't really have to write a prosbel. Rabbanan debei Rav Ashi, the rabbis of the Academy of Rav Ashi, masru milayu la'adadi. They made an ad hoc bezdin amongst themselves, and they gave over their debts one to another. Rabbi Yonason masar milai l'Rab Chia bar Abba. Rabbi Yonason gave over his loan to Reb Chia bar Abba. I assume that Reb Chia bar Abba had another two people with him. Amalei, so he says, Tzrichna midei akrina, do I have to do anything else? Do we have to write it up? Amalei loy tzrichas. No, you don't have to do anything else. Tan Rabbana. Going back to Marshall, everything ends up back to Marshall. I'm still in shock that Reuven gave $600,000. I'm shocked that Reuven has $600,000, but
What the hell is pay off what I owe you for all the other cases?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm trying to clarify on what happens when, based on what said before. If I'm giving the loan the 5th year, so then I write the prosbel, I write that when I give the loan. Or at that point also assign it to Beis Din if I
Well,
want
that's
to
what prosbel does, or assign it to bezdin.
Okay, so everything takes place at the onset of the loan, all this activity.
It doesn't have to. You can make a prosbel later.
Okay.
Now, Tan Rabbanan. Ein loy karka. Let's say Marshall doesn't have any real estate, but Reuven is a very, very, very careful fellow. Knowing Marshall, Reuven gets a rock-solid Shimon Klein to be his guarantor. Reuven ain't no fool, right? Now, even though Marshall doesn't have karka, if Shimon Klein has karka, that's also becomes a milsa d'shchicha, and you could write a prosbel. That's what the Gemara says. Tan Rabbanan ein loy karka lo orev yesh loy karka, but the guarantor has karka, kaisman lo prosbel. Loy v'lo orev ein lohem karka. Let's say Marshall doesn't have karka, the guarantor doesn't have karka, but it happens to be, now this is a rare occurrence, but it happens to be that Mark owes money to Marshall. So there's funds coming in, and Mark has real estate. So if Marshall doesn't have Marshall doesn't have karka, the guarantor doesn't have karka, but somebody that owes Marshall money has karka, because the din is that Reuven could say, Mark, you owe money to Marshall, Marshall owes money to me, give it straight to me. That's called the Shibud of Reb Nassan. Kaisel approves with Reb Nassan. The Tanya Reb Nassan Aimer, Minayin l'noisha b'chavei mana. If let's say Reuven has a claim of Marshall of a mana, b'chavei and Marshall has a claim on Mark for a mana. Minayin shemaitziim mizev v'noisn l'zeh. How do we know we take it from Mark and give it to Reuven? Reuven we give it to the one who the guilt is to him. And we dash him from this pasuk that if Mark owes money to Marshall, Marshall owes money to Reuven, then Reuven could take it straight from Mark. Tanan awesome. We learned over there, this is a Mishnah in Shvius. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. You know, it's wonderful to have 27 Zoomers at the end of the week, you know, and even to have somebody come in all the way from Michigan, unbelievable. So
Does that mean I'm a Michiganer?
that has nothing to do with Michigan.
I'm related to your marshal.
You notice how he opens his mouth wide. Harchev picha v'amalehu. Tanarabanan. Tanan awesome. Hashvias mishametes es hamalve. Shvias, remember, Marshall owes $600,000 to Reuven. Shvias cancels the debt, bein bishtar, bein shaloi bishtar. Whether the debt is one that is documented, whether it's an oral loan. Now, the idea being over here is that if it's a shtar sheyesh ba achrayis, if it's a shtar that says he could collect from any property, even property that's sold to other people after the time of the loan, so maybe Shemitah is not Meshamet because it's as if he already has a lien, almost an ownership on the carcass. He doesn't have to collect. See, if it doesn't have a security clause, so then you can't say that he has it already because Marshall could sell it and then it's out of his clause. It's out of his grip. But if it has an achrayus clause, that if Marshall sells his property subsequent to the loan, Reuven could take it away, maybe Shemitah doesn't relinquish it because it's as if he already has it, because he has the lien. So let's see that inside. It's going to be a machloikis. Tanan also Shvius Meshametes es hamalva. Shvius releases the loan, bein b'shtar, whether it was made with a document, bein shaloi b'shtar, or if it was oral. Rav and Shmuel Dimrei Travai, Rav and Shmuel both say b'shtar means shtar sheyesh b'achrayis nechasim, even if it has a security clause that if Marshall sells it, Reuven could take it away from the buyer. And shaloi b'shtar means she'ein b'achrayis nechasim. It doesn't have a security clause. And kol shechein milval pen. Surely, if it's an oral law, Shemitah will be meshamet, will relinquish the loan, release the loan. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon Lakish, Dimrei Travai. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon Lakish disagree. They say b'shtar means shtar she'ein b'achrayis nechasim. It doesn't have a security clause. Shaloi b'shtar is a milval pen, oral law, an oral loan. Aval shtar sheyesh b'achrayis nechasim. But if there is an IOU note that says that if Marshall sells his property to anybody subsequent to the loan, Reuven could take it away, then ain't a mishamish. It's not mishamin because it's like he already has it because he has a lien no matter what happens to the real estate. And the Gemara says Tanya Kavasi to Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Shimon Lakish. There's a brisa like Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Shimon Lakish. Shtar chayiv mishamin. A promissory note gets released by Shemitah. However, v'im yesh b'achrayis nechasim, if it has a security clause, then ain't a mishamin. It's not released. Tani Yidich, we learned another brisa. Siyam loisoda achas ba'alvasai. This is like what we call in Shas an apoitiki. Reuven gives him a $600,000 loan, and Marshall has some property in North Hollywood. So he says that property, Reuven, is for your loan, Eina Meshamet. Shemitah doesn't release because he already gave him and designated him property. Even if he writes, all my property is security and guarantor to you, Eina Meshamet. So we have a lot of rayas like Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. Yet, we'll see that Rabbi Yochanan didn't rely on this halacha l'maisa.
What does it mean, even?
Even means that it's not one field that he assigned, which is stronger. That's an apoitiki. Now, by the way, I just want to tell you, Rabbi Kranz, the reason I didn't answer you that day is I was in the middle of preparing a chok. I was on time pressure. Kreve de Ravasi, a relative of Ravasi, Havale Ahushtar, even a relative of Ravasi got messed up with Marshall. Kreve de Ravasi, Havale Ahushtar, he had a star, it had a security clause that he could collect from any property that Marshall had or sold to people subsequent to the loan. Also, the coming to Ravasi, he went to Ravasi, Amalei Meshamet or Ein Meshamet. I have a security clause. Will Shemitah release the loan or not? Amalei Ein Meshamet. No, you're safe. It's not going to release it. Shafke, he left Ravasi, but to make sure, he came before Rabbi Yochanan. Also, the coming to Rabbi Yochanan, Amalei Meshamet. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, even if it has a security clause, it's still released by Shemitah. So Ravasi didn't understand. Rabbi Yochanan said that if it has a security clause, it's like you already have it, and it's not Meshamet. So also Ravasi, the coming to Rabbi Yochanan, Amalei, and he asked him, Meshamet or ain't Meshamet? So Amalei Meshamet, it releases it. So he said, but I don't understand. V'amahu da amar eina Meshamet. And here we have an interesting difference between theoretical and halacha l'maisa. Some things might be said that theoretically it would seem to be this way, but they're not ready to say it halacha l'maisa. And that's what the Gemara, that's what Rabbi Yochanan tells him. Amalei v'chi mipnei she'anu medamin nasa maisa. Because we think this is a svara, should we rule on it halacha and take away $600,000 from Marshall? He asked him, but there was a brisa. The brisa is not theoretical. The brisa says that if there's a chrayis nechasim, then Shemitah is not meshamet. Amalei v'tanya kavas in the mouth. There was a brisa like the master. Amalei dilmahi beishamahi. That brisa might be going according to Beishamahi. There's an even stronger svara, and that's the svara Beishamahi we don't paskin like, that shtar ha'oimid ligvais kigavidami. The shtar that stands to be collected is like it's already collected. So it could be that's the reason that the brisa says it, but we don't hold that way. The amar shtar ha'oimid ligvais kigavidami. Tanan Hasam, continuing, you see how we went from Gittin because of a connection of Mipnei Tikkun Ha'olam to Prozbel. The whole daf, we're learning about Shemitah. Tanan Hasam, Hamal ve'eschavei Raimoi Salamashkin. Here, Reuven gave Marshall $600,000, but Marshall gave him a Van Gogh. He gave him a collateral, a Van Gogh. Or if Reuven handed over his IOU notes to Bezdin, ain't Meshamtin, it doesn't release. So the Gemara says, Bishlam Bezdin, okay, the Taf's little Beidina. It's in the hands of Bezdin, so he doesn't have to press for it, so there's no lav of lo yigais. Elamal v'alamashkin my time, the Van Gogh is not Reuven's, it's only collateral. Amarava mishum de tafasle. It's because Reuven is holding it by him. So the Gemara says, so what if he's holding it by him? If let's say Reuven gave a loan to Marshall, and he's living in Marshall's courtyard. The toughest lace, so he has it. Does that mean Hachanami Delay Mishamet that Shvius doesn't release? That's not so. Just because he's living in the courtyard. Amalei, no. Collateral is different. Shani Mashkin de Konile Midrab Yitzchak. There is a raya that when you give a collateral to the creditor, he has an ownership on it. Of course, it's an ownership of it's a tentative ownership. Marshall could pay the money, but in the meantime, it's as if Ruvain has an ownership on the Van Gogh. How do we know this? How do we know that a Baal Chayv acquires the collateral? Shenemar, it says that if let's say you have the pajamas of a poor man as collateral, and you give it back to him in the night, so he has what to sleep with, it's considered by you as charity. Now, if you don't own the pajamas, then why should it be considered charity? If you don't own it, how could it be tzedakah? He has a type of ownership on the collateral. Tanan Hasan, as we turn the page to Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Beis, time goes by fast. So we're having fun over here, learning Torah Hashem to be Mekayim the mitzvah of a Dibarta Bam Lasis Nachas Ruach Liyitzreinu. Talk about the Fum Tzara Agra over here, watching Aaron Swade learn with us in a hospital bed right after a surgery today. Really, really amazing. Really amazing. Right? Barish, you could really relate to that, huh? Look at him. Look at him in the hospital bed. It's absolutely unbelievable. You're teaching all of us how to be Ma'aseh Nefesh v'Torah. So Tanan Hasam, Hamazir Chayv L'Chaveroi B'Shvius. Surprise, surprise! Marshall comes. It's already Shvius. Reuven already gave up hope. He didn't have a pruzbul. And, he says, easy come, easy go. Those were a nice $600,000. And look what happens. On Shemitah, after it was released, Marshall knocks on the door with a $600,000 certified check. Reuven has to say, I'm releasing you from the debt. The im amaloi, but if Marshall says, afal pikain, even so I want to do the right thing, then you kabbalei menu, then he could accept it. Why? Shenema v'zed dvar hashmita. All that's expected is that Reuven has to say the words shmita, released. If Marshall, because he's a Baal B'tach and he doesn't want to have benefit on something that really wasn't his, he wants to give it back, you could accept it. However, Rabbah says if Marshall doesn't say take it anyway, Reuven could hang him from a very high tree until he says it. Make it a very high tree, Reuven. I'm a rabbi v'toli lei ad the amar hachi. He could hang him from a tree. There is another pshat that Reuven could hold his hand out until Marshall says, take it anyway. He could make Marshall feel very, but I don't know, Marshall will win the steering contest. But anyway, Eisvei Abaya asks, Kishahu noisin loi, when Marshall gives it to Reuven, al yomer loi b'chayvi ani noisin lo, he shouldn't say I'm giving it as payment for a debt. El yomer loi shalihain, it's mine, because Shvius already released it. Ubamatana ani noisin lo, and I'm giving it to you as a gift. Amalei, so he says, you're right. Tolile, he could hang him from a tree ad the Amar Hachi until he says it's a gift. Marshall came in like a wise guy and said, I'm paying the loan. You can hang him from a tree until he says it's a gift. Yeah, again, over here, you see that the Chachamim really wanted people to get paid. Because if people didn't get paid, then they won't give loans. Abba Bar Marta, Dahava Abba Bar Minyumi, Abba Bar Marta, that was otherwise known as Abba Bar Minyumi, have a masik by Rabba Zuze. He owed money to Rabba. Aisinu Nihale B'Shvius. He came to pay him on Shemitah. Amalei, so he gave it to Rabba. Rabba told him, Mishamirani, I release you. So Shaklino Vazel, so he took the money back and left. A blood brother of Marshall's, right? The Rabba says he releases it. So he took the money back and left. Also Abaya came, Ashkechedava Otziv. He saw that Rabba was sad. Amalei Amai Otziv Ma, why is the master sad? Amalei Hachi Ave Maisa, he came to pay me. I said I release him, so he left without giving me the money. So Azal Gabe, so Abaya went to Abba Bar Minyumi. Amalei Amtislei Zuze Lamar, did you go and pay the master? Amalei in. Amalei Amai Amalach, what did he tell you? Amalei Mishamirani, that I'm releasing it. Amalei, so he said to him, V'omrit lei, did you then tell him, Afal Pikain, even so? Amalei lei. He said, no, I don't know that that's what I'm supposed to do. He said, I wanted to go Lefnim Mishur Sadin, again the money, he said he's releasing, I left. Amalei, so Abaya told Abba Bar Marta, the Amrit Le Afal became, if you would have told him, even so, have a sheklina minach, he would have taken it from you. Hashtamias, now, at any case, Amtinu Nihale, bring it to him, the Amale, and say to him, I know you released it, but Afal Pikain, here's the money. Ozul Amtinu Nihale, he went and he brought it to Rabbah, the Amale Afal Pikain, even so, Shaklina Minei, and Rabbah took it from him. Omar, Rabbah commented, he didn't have the knowledge for this young scholar. Rashi Masechtas Tana says Tzum Rabban is a young Talmudic scholar. He didn't have the knowledge, Meikara, to do this. Yeah.
Why did he have to express that he's Mishamet? I was already Mishamet by force of the...
No, because that's a drasha that we dash him from the pasuk. Zed Devar Hashmita. Devar is a lashon of Dibur. You have to say it. When the person comes to you, you have to say, I release it.
Okay. And if he didn't come, it's still released.
What?
If he never showed up, the loan
If he never showed up,
the loan is still released.
And a chanami.
Yeah.
And a chanami. But what if the person wants to offer it? So the Torah says you have to release it. Now, yeah.
It appears that he is speaking disparagingly.
Oh, you want to know why that's not Lashon Hara? So I think that it could be that he wanted it to be more taught that this is the proper procedure. And therefore he said, even though he's a Talmudic scholar, you see, he didn't know about it. So we have to teach people this. It also bothered me. Baruch Ian, it's good to have you. I know, it's a long trip, I know. How's the weather where you live?
A lot of traffic.
A lot of traffic, I know. I know from my house to your house, there's about hundreds of thousands of ants. I know that. Yeah. And bubble gum that you get stuck on. I know. Says the Gemara. Long dafim.
Shemitah is Mishamet at the end of the year.
What?
Shemitah's Mishamet at the end.
No.
No, it's Mishamet at the beginning.
You see it's in beginning.
Yeah, I know that's what it seems to indicate, but I thought we always did it at the end.
People make principles both, I think, don't they?
Okay, well, that we'll see. But the you see from here that you could hand it over at the time of the loan, even a lot earlier. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Nachman. Here, this is an interesting thing. Reuven comes to collect the money from Marshall. So Marshall, we know, is a stickler for law, especially when it has to do with forking over $600,000. So he says to Reuven, where's your prosbul? So Reuven says, I wrote it, but I lost it. Marshall says, yeah, tell it to the Marines. You wrote it and you lost it. So who do we believe? Especially since Reuven wants to take away the money from Marshall, normally the rule is, Hamoitzi mechabeira alav haraya. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Nachman, Neman Adam Leimer Pruzbel Haya Biyadi V'Avad Mimeni. Reuven is believed to say, I had a pruzbel, but it was lost. Now my time, what's the reason? Kavan the Tekinu Rabban and pruzbel, since they made a pruzbel is an easy thing, just write. And you even could say that you're handing it over. Reuven wouldn't forsake a heter and do an iser. So it's credible that he had one and he lost it. This is interesting. When they came before Rav to collect money, Amalei midei pruzbel hayalach, and Reuven doesn't present the pruzbel. So Rav says that the dayan, and in this case Rav, could ask, did you have a pruzbel perchance of avad and it got lost? Now normally the dayan doesn't act like an oirich din, like a lawyer. And he wouldn't suggest, if Reuven didn't say he lost it, what is he suggesting it for? However, in this case, again, we're always interested in protecting the rights of the lender. And we have no problem messing up Marshall. We don't. Well, Michigan, Chicago, it makes no difference where he is. Why do you think he's on the run? Shalom Bayis. Shalom Bayis. That's why the police were chasing him halfway to Michigan. You heard him say he stops in a whole bunch of different places. Amalei. In this case, we could open our mouths to mute. In other words, we could give advice. Reuven, you could say that you had one and you lost it. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, V'chein bal chayv shemoitzi shtar chayv ve'eini moi pruzbel. If Reuven presents a document, but he doesn't have a pruzbel, hariyelu lo yiparu. He can't get the money. So the Gemara says Tanai, that's Machlokes Tanai. The Tanya, Amoitzi shtar chayv tzarich sheyeh moi pruzbel. He has to have the pruzbel. He can't claim I had one and I lost it. The Chachamim ma'im remeina tzarich. Rashi says it doesn't mean that he doesn't need it at all, but the Neman Leimer, he's believed to say, I had one and I lost it. The Neman Leimer of it, that I lost it. Now, new sugya. A very interesting sugya. So in this case, Baruch Ian is, he keeps a low profile because of his slaves. It's, don't worry, we won't say this in front of 500,000 Haimashant or anytime.com. We won't do that. But Baruch, Baruch got he has a loft in Fairways. A lot of people don't have a loft, but he has a loft because he needs slave quarters, right? So, Eved Shenishbeh. If, let's say, Baruch's slave was taken by bandits into captivity. Upaduhu, Mark ransomed them. See, Mark, you come early, you get involved in a lot of action, right? Ransoming slaves, very, very interesting. So Baruch's slave was, we'll call it Tony. Tony was captured, and Marshall ransomed them. Im l'shum eved yishtabed. If Marshall ransomed him to remain a slave, then he remains meshubed as a slave. We'll have to see, is that back to Baruch or to Mark? Im l'shum ben chayrim, if he ransomed him as a free man, then lo yishtabed. Then Tony goes free. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, ben kach u ben kach yishtabed. Whether he ransomed him for a slave or he ransomed him for a free man, he remains a slave. So now the Gemara wants to know, we know that there's a difference before years and after years. Did Baruch already give up hope? Oh, it's Tony. He has a stockade of slaves. On this side of the Garden State Parkway, no one has more than him. Yeah, he has a stockade, right? So if it's been a while, he might have given up hope on Tony. Or is it before years? Now, before years, if he wasn't Miyayish, it remains his. So says the Gemara, B'may askinan, Ilay malefnei years, if Baruch didn't give up hope yet, so what's the difference? L'shum ben chayrim, even if Mark redeemed him as a free man, amay lo yishtabed. It's Baruchian's property. It has a brand. He has a brand on him. Yeah, he brands them. Yeah, he has a brand. He has a brand. If the HOA would know about this, I'm telling you, right? He brands them. So and he never gave up hope on it. Ela la'achar yish. Oh, he was already miyayish. He gave up hope. So then l'shum eved amay yishtabed. Even if he ransoms it for a slave, why should he be meshubed? Baruch already gave up on it. Amar Abaye says, let me tell you what we're talking about over here. La'olam lifnei yish. It's talking about where Baruch didn't give up hope on Tony. So therefore, l'shum eved, if Mark redeems him to remain a slave, then yishtabed l'Rabbi Rishon. Then the eved goes back to Baruchian because Baruchian didn't give up hope. L'shum ben chayim, but if Mark ransomed him to be a free man, so then he goes free. Lo yishtabed lo l'Rabbi Rishon v'lo l'Rabbi Sheni. He doesn't go to the Baruch. He doesn't go to Mark. Now, of course, he doesn't go to Mark because Mark redeemed him to be a free man. But the question is, why shouldn't he go back to Baruch? Baruch wasn't miyayish. So what that Mark? Mark's a big tzaddik. He ransoms him to be a free man. But it's Baruchian's property. It has his emblem on it. There's a BI on his wrist. Baruchian on his wrist. It's his property. He didn't give up hope. Why? Says the Gemara, answer the Gemara, L'Rabbi Rishon namilai. You know why? Because remember, an Eved has mitzvahs. We're afraid that if we say that he has to go back to Baruch, Mark won't bother ransoming him. Mark says, I only spend my John Hancocks. I only spend my K-bills if he's going to be free. To do somebody else's slave, to say, I'm not going to ransom. Dilma mimne v'lei parke. Shimon Gamliel Eimer, before years, ben kach yishtabed. Whether it's for an Eved, for a free man, it goes back to Baruch. Baruch wasn't miyayish, it goes back to Baruch. We're afraid that he won't be ransom, we're not afraid of that. Because he has a mitzvah, it's like a woman anyway. Just like it's a mitzvah to redeem free men, so that won't stop Mark from redeeming. So that's a bias pshat. Rava has a whole different pshat. Rava says it's talking about where Baruch was already miyayish. Rava amar la'olam la'achayish. So if Mark redeems him to be an Eved, so then Mark keeps stoning. Doesn't go back to Baruch because Baruch was miyayish. Ulashum Eved yishtabed l'Rabbi Sheni. L'shum ben Chayrin, if he redeems him as a free man, so then lo yishtabed lo l'Rabbi Rishon v'lo l'Rabbi Sheni. Then he taka goes free. L'Rabbi Sheni lo, he doesn't go to Mark because Mark redeemed him as a free man. L'shum ben Chayrin parke. He doesn't go back to Baruch because Baruch was already miyayish. L'Rabbi Rishon nami lo da l'achar yishab. Now, what's the reason if it's Achar Yish? What's the reason that either way it goes back to Baruchian? Rab Shimon Gamliel like ben kach or ben kach yishtabed. You know why? Because if we say that a slave could get his freedom this way, when there are pirates and bands of thieves around, the slave, in order to get away from slavery, he might throw himself in the hands of thieves. Even after Yish, and even if Mark redeems him as a free man, slaves will throw themselves upon thieves hoping for a better future. And and get themselves out from under the tyranny of the Ian factory. Now, please, we want to ask everybody that, the Dina de Malchusa is not, so please don't tell anybody that it's Baruch Ian from Fairways. Don't make sure. Now, Meisvei. Amal lehen Rab Shimon Gamliel, kishem shemitzvah liftais es b'nei chayrin, just like it's a mitzvah to redeem a free man, kach mitzvah liftais es ha'avon. So that's good according to Abaya's pshat. Abaya says it was talking about the Fnei Yish, and that even if Mark redeems him as a free man, it goes back to Baruch. And we say that it goes back to Baruch nonetheless because we're not afraid that if he can't redeem him as a free man, he won't redeem him. The reason for Reb Shimon Gamliel is not because it's a mitzvah to redeem an Eved. The reason is because he says that even though it's after Yish, we give it back to Baruch because otherwise slaves will throw themselves upon their captors. Hai kishen mishum dechizkihu, because we're afraid otherwise that slaves will throw themselves upon their captors. Says Amalach Reb Shimon Gamliel have a yodei maika amrei rabbanan. They didn't know if the Rabbanan were talking about before Yish or after Yish. So if it's before Yish, then even if Mark redeems him as a free man, we still give it back to Baruch. Hainu kashem, because just like it's a mitzvah to redeem a free man, it's a mitzvah to redeem a servant. The reason why we give it back to Baruch, regardless of how Mark redeemed him, is because it's a takana, otherwise we're afraid, kamrisu, then it's kiddush chizkiah. Then it's like chizkiah because we're afraid that otherwise slaves will throw themselves upon their captors in order for a chance of freedom. I already recorded the Mishnah Yomis, but I'm going to say it again for the shir here, Ilui Nishmas Rabbi Yerachmiel Gershon ben Rab Tzvi Yehuda and Lafur Shleimer for Eliyahu Moshe ben Chaya Sarah by the Klugman family, and Ilui Nishmas Basi Bas Robert, Shlomo ben Avram Alevi, Perel Bas Ruvain for the Fisher family. And let me tell you that we're just closing in on Masechtas Yuma as we learn the 6th and the 7th Mishnayos in Yuma. Misha Chazul Bo.
What time and what's the Shabbos?
10:15 still.
Thank you, okay.
Misha Chazul Bulmus. If somebody was seized by a ravenous hunger, this is a disease that if a person doesn't eat, he could die. And his eyesight begins to lose focus. So Machil and I say we feed him, of course, in Yom Kippur, and even during the week, afilu dvarim tmeim. Even if there's nothing available, we give him bacon, we give him lobster. Ad sheyeh oru einav, until he gets his eyes, his focus back. His eyes become illuminated. Mishen shachay kelev shaita. If somebody is bitten by a mad dog. Now there was a belief that giving from the lobe of the liver of the sick dog to the one that was bitten could be a cure. However, the Tanna Kama holds it's an old wives' tale, and therefore you shouldn't do it. You can't feed him from the liver of the dog that was diseased because it doesn't work, and then the dog meat is of course not kosher. Rabbi Masya ben Chorish matter. Rabbi Masya ben Chorish says it is a good remedy, and you could do it. If somebody has a disease in his throat, which might refer to scurvy, which it starts in the gums, passes to the throat, and then goes down to the intestines, and it can be fatal. You could give a medicine even if you have to grind it, and even if you have to cut it from the ground, because it's a suffix sakanas nefashis, but called suffix nefashis, and even a doubtful suffix doiches a Shabbos supersedes the Shabbos. Mishnah Zayin tells us Misha nafla alav mapilas. If somebody, we all remember the terrible tragedy in Surfside. If a building collapses upon people, and we're doing a rescue mission on Shabbos, Safek Husham, Safek Einasham. We're not sure if he was in the room or not. Safek Kai, Safek Meis. We're not sure if he's alive or dead. Safek Ayvikam, Safek Yisrael. We're not sure if there was a Jew there or not. So even though it's a triple doubt, Mefakhin Olav Esagal, because of Safek Pikuch Nefesh, we dig him out of the rubble. Mitzol Chai. If you found him alive, but the doctors say he won't make it for more than 2 hours. So it's Chaye Shah. Mefakhin Olav. We still are Mechal Shabbos for him. Now the reason that they say, one of the reasons for Chil Shabbos is be Mechal one Shabbos that he should have many Shabbos. You don't have that reason here. Because he's not living to next Shabbos. He's not even living to Sunday. But still the halacha is, even for Chaye Shah, we're Mechal Shabbos. There's a beautiful Meiri. The Meiri says that we're Mechal Shabbos for Chaye Shah because in that few moments of life, he could do tshuva and gain himself an eternity. Be a mace, but however, if he's dead, then Yanichu, then you can't dig a corpse out of the rubble on Shabbos. You have to wait till after Shabbos to recover the body. Rabbi say, as always, it's a real pleasure. We want to let you know that Motzei Shabbos Shir is at 10:15. Next week I'll probably be broadcasting from the Catskills, where I'll be probably next week, and same time, Daf Yomi at 10:15 and 8:50 during the week. If you want to sponsor next week's share, 718-916-3100, rmmwsi@aol.com. Thank you for joining us.